My question is for Josh. You and your wife have separate residences in different states. Does this mean that you both have duplicate items in your homes? And how does that work into the minimalist lifestyle?
So let me start by saying, Michelle, clearly you're not caught up on the podcast.
It's probably from like 3 months ago that she said.
No, she just called it this week.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, Michelle, I'm just kidding. But here's what I'll say is, yeah, Bex and I do live separately, although we don't live in separate states anymore. We did live in separate states for 5 years. At least we lived in separate states half the time. So we were together half the time. We were apart half the time. And that rhythm seems to work pretty well for us. Maybe not week on, week off, but 2 days on, 2 days off, etc. Works well for us. That's a rhythm that I'm not prescribing to anyone else. Although I would encourage folks to notice if a rhythm that they're currently in isn't working for them. Instead of trying to force that rhythm to work for you, why not simply change the rhythm? However, that's not what your question is about. Your question is about duplicate things. And this presupposes that duplicates are necessarily a bad thing. Now, I have probably 10 pairs of underwear. They're all duplicates.
Fraud.
And so what I will say is that something being duplicate isn't a bad thing. And so the heart of your question, though, is, well, maybe if you live together full time, then you could get by with fewer things. And I would acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Michelle, if you and I lived together, we would get by with fewer things. I would have to buy less toothpaste. I wouldn't have to have 2 tubes of toothpaste. We could just share the same tube, right? In fact, if all of the people here in this room, we have Danny in Alabama, and we have Professor Sean and Jordan O'More and Ryan and TK and me, if we all just lived in, a frat house together,
there'd be so much coffee.
New reality show idea.
And it's like we all own nothing. And
Right.
Anyway, we would have fewer duplicates, but our lives would be markedly worse for us, right? Especially for me. And so I think we have to take that into account. Now, here's the funny thing is the same tube of toothpaste. Like, yeah, I might have a tube of toothpaste at my place and Bex has a tube of toothpaste at her place. But if we had just had one tube of toothpaste, we use it twice as quickly, right? And so, yes, there's nothing inherently wrong with duplicates. In fact, I think if you come to my house, you're going to say, oh, wow, this is... you don't own much, right? But I own some things that might duplicate what is going on at Bex's house. She's her own individual. I'm an individual. And so we have our own individual needs. And there's nothing wrong with that. A better question for me is, does this thing add value to my life? Does it serve a purpose? Does it bring out the joy in me in some way? Does it amplify or enhance my experience of life? If so, wonderful. If not, then I'm going to let it go, regardless of whether or not it's a duplicate.
Yeah, what I hear in Michelle's question is like, hey, you've got a set of pots and pans at your place. So you probably need pots and pans over at Bex's place too. And I mean, you two live much closer together now. So yeah, there might be some things that you used to have duplicates of that you no longer have duplicates of.
Yeah. And that will always continue to be true as I assess what adds value to my life. Yeah, you're right. Bex owns a whole lot more kitchenware than I do, right?
Yeah, and if someone's going to cook dinner, you're probably going to go to Bex's to cook some dinner.
Or no, I cook it by myself, but I have one skillet.
Right.
And that's all I need for me, right? And so, and if Bex wants to cook, great, then I'll go over there and she can cook. We're still living together about half the time. We found that rhythm that works for us. But because that rhythm works for us, the time apart, yes, it does require some things that I otherwise wouldn't have. But I'm not willing to make myself miserable in order to simply own fewer things. That's not what minimalism is. That's not the heart of minimalism. TK, we were talking about this before we started recording. You were trying to see an announcement on Twitter and you noticed some tweet that popped up.
Yeah, it was so interesting. There was a quote where you talked about consumerism and someone says, well, like you guys sell books and things like that, and you have a podcast, and I forgot your response, but it was something like, "There's a difference between
conscious consumption and consumerism."
Right, and it was interesting because what was overlooked in that response to you is that anytime you add the letters ISM after anything
Ism.
and you turn it into an ism, that ism changes everything.
Yeah.
To put an ism after a word means that we're not just going to talk about that word. We're going to talk about a lifestyle in which everything that you do is oriented around that word. So consumption is human. Consumerism is anti-human, right? Those are two different things. And so I think, this question it's a little similar to other questions I've had people ask me, like, so the minimalists living in California, that doesn't sound very minimalistic. California is a really expensive place. And so people have this impression that, if you're a minimalist, you have to live as inexpensively as possible. You got to find the cheapest place, the fewest amount of things. And it's less about the quantity of things that you have, and it's about understanding that efficiency is about optimizing for what makes you the best version of yourself. And there are things that you could do in the name of owning less stuff that could actually make you more inefficient and less happy and less effective in other areas of life. You talked about the owning one pair of underwear versus 10 pairs. Well, if you own one pair of underwear, but you're doing laundry every single day, well, that's wasteful in another way, right? So everything has opportunity costs.
Yeah.
So you always got to ask that question, compared to what? It's easy to say, hey, man, if you all live together, you would have fewer things. But what are the other costs you'd be paying in order to live together? And how might that compromise your ability to serve? That's why we got to think about things in terms of what makes us better, what holds us back, not the number of things that are involved.
Yeah. I think it's funny that people think that we don't see the irony in everything we do.
Everything that we do is blanketed by irony.
Yes, everything. And one thing too that I've had to shift my perspective on, it is like, putting some products out there, some physical products. And, we've done that with our books. We've done that with the bag that we partnered with Malcolm Fontier with Pact. All that to say is I've had to realize that, like, every single one of us, we are selling something. Every single one of us. No one is not selling something. And the question is what are you selling? And is it meaningful? So when I think about the books, when I think about, the bag, it's like, these are some really high quality, like, I'm very proud to be like, wow, look what we made. And yeah, I mean, it's, if you come at minimalism with don't consume, don't produce, well, you're a hermit. Like, that's what that is. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's interesting because it's when someone makes a judgment like that, whoa, you sell books and blah, blah, blah. I can't even like give it a serious response, because it's like they're seeing what they want to see, and that's okay. They can see whatever they want to see.
Yeah. I remember my mom once told me, don't answer an unserious question with a serious answer.
Right.
And
that's so good.
Quite often what we will do is we'll have someone approach us with a criticism, and I'm not going to throw out a blanket statement like, oh, these haters or critics or whatever, trolls. Yeah,
sure.
That stuff doesn't mean anything to me. Like, I think those are thought terminating cliches as well, to dismiss someone. Oh, it's just a troll. No, it's someone who feels as though they have some sort of original thought. It's like when I walk by someone in the airport and they're like, hey, minimalist, I figured you'd be traveling with no bags.
Thought you'd be riding a donkey.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, you can feel that way, but you're just trying to be, you're trying to joke or whatever, right?
Right.
But to answer it seriously is then to take all the fun, the humor, the joy out of it. And so what I will often do, I remember recently I posted a picture of, like, when I was moving. I posted it on Instagram, and it was like 4 or 5 boxes in my kitchen of everything. And several people, I think Danny was one of them, right? Several people were like, oh, you call yourself a minimalist, jokingly. And I, instead of like being defensive at all, I said, it's not mine. I swear I'm holding it for a friend.
Right.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.